Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are embarking on a truly wild, intensely meta-fictional journey through the pages of Dreamweaver Book 6, Harbinger of the Deplorable Dream. Listen, this isn't just another story. It is a profound, often hilarious, and deeply philosophical deconstruction of reality, video game mechanics, and the incredibly fragile, easily fragmented human psyche. Today, we're going to look at exactly what happens when the lines between the strict, hard-coded rules of a digital world and the harsh, completely unpredictable nature of our physical reality just absolutely dissolve. And honestly, more importantly, we'll explore what happens when a protagonist's actual, literal line shatters into distinct, walking-talking pieces. So get comfortable, settle in, and let's unravel the brilliantly chaotic mind of Zan.
To really set the stage here, let me ask you a question. What is the ultimate street fight tactic in a video game? Now, if you're a gamer, you're probably instantly thinking of, complex frame data, mastering preset combos, reading your opponent's micro movements, or maybe even finding some obscure invincibility glitch hidden deep in the game's code. But in the world of Dreamweaver, our protagonist, Prince Azan Nightbane, or just Zan for short, takes a completely different, incredibly grounded approach during a brutal 50-round deathmatch against his rival, Face. Zan is heartbroken, Face is desperately trying to show off, and the tension in the room is palpably high. But here's the kicker. Zan doesn't win by being better at the game's internal mechanics. No way. He wins by realizing that while their avatars are battling it out in a virtual arena, their actual bodies are still seated right next to each other in physical reality. And physical reality? Well, it has its own brute set of rules. There is this hilariously audacious, almost MS Paint-style breakdown in the source material that perfectly captures the climax of this match. Picture this. You've got the game screen showing Face furiously working his controller, totally immersed, literally sweating out the final moments of the round. And then, you have Zan. Zan has strategically and very quietly placed his foot right next to the physical PS2 console on the floor. When Face gets a little too excited, leaning back and pulling on his gamepad to execute that one final, glorious move, Zan simply uses his foot to execute a physical stealth disconnect. He literally unplugs Face's controller from the console. It's an actual, real-world trap set to win a virtual deathmatch. It is just hilariously brilliant, and it completely subverts every single expectation of how a tense, high-stakes gaming rivalry is supposed to go down. And the best part? Zan's absolute lack of shame in cheating to win this match is delivered with the most chaotic, high-octane, over-the-top anime energy imaginable. He triumphantly stands up and declares his ultimate, unbeatable move, screaming, "The strategically annoying but ever useful, undetectably stealthy disconnect with no warranties." Of course, Face just collapses in absolute, soul-crushing defeat, roaring that Zan cheated. But Zan, he just brushes it off with this casual arrogance, pointing out that, hey, this is a street fight, not an official esports tournament. And in a street fight, absolutely anything goes. It's a fantastic comedic moment for sure, but it brilliantly establishes a core theme for us. Zan completely refuses to be bound by conventional rules. He manipulates his physical environment to his advantage. However, as we are about to see, manipulating the external world is vastly, vastly easier than trying to control your own rapidly deteriorating internal landscape. All right, moving right along to Section 1, A Mind Divided. We're looking at Zan's fractured psyche. We transition now from the physical world's absurdities to the deeply splintered, profoundly troubled psychological reality of our protagonist's mind. Zan's stress, his underlying trauma, and just the sheer existential weight of his existence don't just give him a bad migraine. His consciousness literally shatters. Let's break down exactly who these splintered personalities are because it's fascinating. First, we have Zanian, who embodies reason and experience. He is the calm, analytical, and sometimes painfully blunt side of Zan's intellect. Then there's Zanzur, the raw manifestation of anger, loud, endlessly aggressive, and driven by this desperate need to never, ever fail again. We also have Zanabana, who represents love, endlessly dramatic, intensely feverish, and frankly deeply embarrassing for Zan to have to witness from a third-person perspective. And finally, Zan Bazoro Dumbian, the embodiment of fearlessness and raw courage, which, as you might guess, often leads to wildly reckless decisions. Now, these aren't just imaginary voices whispering in his head. They are entirely distinct, physical entities standing in the room with him, arguing, debating, and acting completely on their singular, amplified impulses.
And this creates a truly bizarre paradox. On one hand, you have the incredibly loud, chaotic noise of these attributes constantly arguing with each other. Zenzir is screaming for immediate action, Zanyen is delivering these brutal, cold, logical takedowns, and Zanabana is literally spouting romantic poetry in the corner. It's an absolute tempest of extreme personalities confined to a single room. But on the other hand, you have the original Zan. Because his core traits have physically walked right out of his body, Zan is left behind as a quiet, relatively empty, blank shell. He is the hollowed-out vessel that has been completely drained of its essence. So he's forced to act as this frustrated, exhausted babysitter to his own extreme personality traits, desperately trying to wrangle them into cooperation, all while feeling entirely hollowed out himself.
Which leads us to this absolutely fantastic, tyrannical quote from Zan himself. As his various selves relentlessly bicker and argue about how to handle their dire situation, Zan finally just snaps. He yells at the top of his lungs. "Indeed, it is as thou imagineth. My mind is ruled by tyranny. There can only be one me to rule me all." He literally acts like a megalomaniacal anime villain desperately trying to conquer his own mind. He tries to assert absolute dominance over his own splintered emotions by sheer force of will. But, it's a totally futile, ridiculous power struggle. You can't just yell at your own reason and your own anger to submit to your authority. It really highlights the deeply relatable, though highly exaggerated, human struggle of trying to force our conflicting emotions into submission rather than taking the time to actually understand them.
So the crucial point is coming up here in Section 2, Redefining Sloth. Let's look at the concept of sin in Dreamweaver.
All of this comedic internal bickering builds to a much darker, much more philosophical core. We are moving into the deep lore of the text right now. In most traditional contexts, when we hear the word sloth, we automatically think of laziness, right? A reluctance to work or simply physical inactivity, plunking down on the couch. But Dreamweaver flips this concept entirely on its head. Here, sloth is personified as a terrifying entity known as Zamfar, and Zanian, Zan's own manifestation of reason, makes it explicitly clear. Zanfar is not laziness. Actually, scratch that, it's the exact opposite. Zanfar is the exact opposite of good. He is the living embodiment of everything a person denies, curses, and suppresses deep within themselves. If Zan has an angelic nature, Zanfar is his absolute demonic equivalent. If Zan has a capacity for love, Zanfar is his pure, unfiltered hatred. This is a profound psychological redefinition. It suggests that the ultimate sloth isn't about failing to get out of bed. No, it's about the spiritual and mental decay that occurs when you actively refuse to confront your own shadow. Zanfar is the dark mirror of Zan, and he's growing stronger, feeding on every negative, suppressed instinct Zan refuses to acknowledge. And because of the looming terror of this dark mirror, Zanyan offers Zan this surprisingly wise, incredibly profound piece of advice. He tells him, "I really advise you to strengthen your strengths instead of wasting all your time trying to raise your weaknesses to be at par with your strengths. You are causing yourself unnecessary pain." This is a massive, massive philosophical takeaway from this explainer. Zan is so deeply terrified of his dark side, of the potential of Zanfar breaking loose, that he focuses all of his mental energy on policing his own weaknesses. Zanyan points out the tragic flaw in human nature. We spend so much time obsessed with the darkness we fear might be hiding inside us, and in doing so, we completely forget to cultivate the good traits that actually define who we are. By fixating on suppressing the bad, we literally give it power.
Let's move to Section 3, the empty vessel. We really need to talk about Zan's hollow core. So, what actually happens to a person when their core emotions physically walk away from them? What is left behind when your reason, your anger, and your courage are all literally standing on the other side of the room? Well, Zan asks his fiercely observant girlfriend, Ayuki, how she can possibly tell which clone is the real him among this chaotic crowd. She simply looks at him and points out, obviously, the emptiest one would be you since you're their vessel, and currently, you're the one mostly devoid of any personality. Wow. It's incredibly funny, but it brilliantly illustrates the profound tragedy of Zan's situation. His true core self is currently defined entirely by an absence. Because all of his vibrant, driving emotions are outside of him, he's left completely hollow. The real Zan is just the empty shell, wandering around waiting to be filled. And let me tell you, the intense danger of being an empty vessel while your emotions run completely free becomes immediately and hilariously apparent. Zanian warns Zan that the longer these attributes stay separated from the host body, the more their perceptions will drastically shift until they become completely separate, autonomous beings.
Zan realizes this is already happening when he notices Zanabana, his literal walking attribute of love, starting to lose focus on Ayumi and openly considering testing the waters with other alternatives. Just imagine the absolute cold sweat panic of watching your own biological capacity for love wander off down the street to potentially hit on other girls. Zan is forced to frantically, desperately intervene to ensure he doesn't literally steal his own girlfriend from himself. It's an absolute masterclass in blending high-concept metaphysical psychology with brilliant situational comedy. All right, hold on tight because we are hitting Section 4, Looming Calamity, the final threats.
So Zan's splintered mind isn't just a quirky comedic inconvenience anymore, it's a massive life-threatening vulnerability. With a genuinely high-stakes threat rapidly approaching, Zan, in his current hollowed-out, fragmented state, is completely unprepared for what is coming. He needs guidance. He needs a master. So he turns to the incredibly imposing, legendary figure known as the Nightmare King. Now, in typical shonen anime fashion, we totally expect the protagonist to be put through a grueling, montage-worthy training arc to break him down and rebuild him for the final battle, right? Zan steps up, ready to bleed, ready to sweat, ready to be pushed to his absolute physical limits. And what is the grand, ultimate preparation regimen handed down by this terrifying entity? The Nightmare King bellows, "Your special training is no training for a week." It is completely absurd. It completely derails Zan's expectations and ours. In the face of ultimate, world-ending destruction, the mandate is absolute, enforced, maddening inactivity.
And how does Zan react to this? With an endless string of dots. Complete, stunned, utter silence. It perfectly mirrors the comedic timing of a manga panel where a character just entirely freezes, their brain completely failing to process the staggering stupidity of what they just heard. Zan just stands there, glitching out in real time. He eventually stammers out, "Did I perchance not perceive your words correctly?" But no, he heard perfectly. The Nightmare King forces Zan to sit with his own violently fragmented mind, unable to distract himself with the comfortable rhythm of physical exertion. The true training isn't physical at all. It's forcing the empty vessel to sit down and finally confront the deafening silence of its own hollow core.
Let's move to the timeline and see how this all builds the overarching narrative framework, because everything is being pushed to an absolute breaking point. Days prior, we had the catalyst, the literal traumatic splitting of Zan's soul and his wildly comedic struggles with his physical emotions. In the present, while Zan is agonizingly forced into a state of no training, stewing in his own emptiness, Ayumi is desperately seeking forbidden knowledge in the Kurosawa library. She is frantically trying to uncover the true, horrific nature of Zanfar and the forgotten history of dreams and nightmares before time runs out. And all of this is hurtling at breakneck speed toward the looming, absolutely unavoidable final confrontation. The rapid escalation from internal psychological comedy to dark, apocalyptic lore is incredibly tight here.
Which brings us to the very end of this explainer and the final, incredibly provocative cliffhanger of Book 6. The text leaves us with a booming theatrical challenge echoing in the dark. And so, Dreamweaver, weaver of dreams, hath thou the power to face the weaver of calamity? Think about it. Zan's mind is completely splintered into pieces. His terrifying dark shadow, Zanfar, is rising in power. His ultimate training consists of doing absolutely nothing for a week. So what does this all mean? Does an empty vessel, accompanied by a bickering team of his own fractured emotions, actually have what it takes to face ultimate calamity? It's a brilliant hook. It's the kind of ending that leaves you absolutely fascinated, sitting on the edge of your seat, and hungry to discover exactly how Zan puts himself back together, if he even can. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive into the chaotic mind of the Dreamweaver. Until next time, keep exploring the narratives that challenge your reality.